Good evening. We are getting close to our start here. There's still a few seats here in the front row, right very close to the paranormal equipment. I don't know if that's putting some people off, that they're afraid of it. But there are, I think, even 6 chairs still open, so if you'd like to take a seat in the front row. You go to the equipment? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, I think people are quieting down, so that seems to be my signal to maybe it's time to start. Welcome to the Minot State University College of Arts and Sciences Campus-Community Dialogues. We started this a couple of years ago because we felt that people aren't really talking about things anymore, they're just yelling online. And so we decided, well, let's try and bring the community together here on campus. It's one of the big functions of university as we see it, to facilitate dialogue. So here we are. And we've had several controversial topics. I think we started out with religion. We've done gun control. So we've had some hot topics that we discussed here. Today is maybe less controversial or more fun. And being that it's almost Halloween, today's topic is on ghosts and the paranormal. And some people really believe in that there is such a thing, and others are like, no, that can't be science, right? So we're going to explore that dichotomy today quite a bit. If you can find a seat, hopefully there's just a few open. Around the corner, there's a table with coffee and water and some brownies. So we're pretty relaxed here, so get up anytime, get yourself a brownie or something to drink. We're not going to be all super formal here, okay? The way this is going to run, if it runs like usual, I'll introduce our guests here today. About the paranormal, and then we'll open it up for questions in the audience, and you can talk amongst each other, ask each other questions, you can ask questions of our guests, and we'll just open it wide open. We have two microphones to go around so we can cover the room, so bear with us. We're trying to get to everyone who wants to say something. Okay? So let me introduce our guests tonight. Here on the right is Wendy Kimball. She's the lead investigator of Paranormal Investigators of North Dakota. She goes all over the state where there are sightings or sensations of paranormal activity, and does readings. And she actually has some of her equipment here. I'm sure she's going to talk about a little bit how that works. And then we have Dr. Jeannette Lartius. She is an associate professor of sociology right here at Minot State, and she's going to, I think, address the fact that why are so people interested in this, what drives us to be interested in that, how are our minds about these paranormal activities, like, why is it so fascinating? I mean, look at the turnout here, right? So what is the fascination? So I think I'll just open it up, and you can have your brief opening statements to get things going, because it's always tough to start with a question, right? And then we'll open it up. So, Wendy, are you going first?
I think I
Jeannette? Okay. All right.
Well, to focus on why is a belief structure persistent? What is it doing for society? What is it doing functionally? Why is it so useful to so many people to believe certain things? So from a cultural point of view, we don't ask the question, do ghosts exist? We look at it from a point of view of, why do so many people believe in? What is it doing? What is it giving people? So we ask the broader question, what is the societal function of these belief structures? And institution structures and beliefs maintain themselves generally and perpetuate themselves, generally contribute to the social fabric in some way. And that's what we want to understand, is how that's happening. And ghosts and spirits and the paranormal fit that definition. They have been around basically since the dawn of human existence, the belief structures related to them. We have this natural tendency, it's a natural tendency in our brain, that we view ourselves, loosely defined, as a body and then something more, a spirit, a soul, something else that's separate from our body. And that's been culturally dominant when you look at all, cultures throughout social history. And the idea is that our bodies fail. They fail us, and we don't occupy them anymore after a certain point. But what happens later? And so there's a lot of institutions historically that have tried to address these questions in one way or the other. And this bifurcation of this idea happens a lot. We have lots of bifurcations. We have heaven and hell, good and evil. We have alive and not alive. We have all these different bifurcations that we use to organize our world around us and take in all those sensations around us and try to make sense of them. And the simpler that we can do that, the easier. My students, I've seen a few past students around here, know that I say this a lot in my classes. Human beings are intellectually lazy, and we like structures to give us guideposts to interpret all these sensations that are coming at us at a daily basis. So all these institutions and belief structures do that. One of the functions of paranormal is to organize those things that we can't explain, whether it's by science, whether it's by religion, whatever, education. We just can't explain them, and that's very uncomfortable for us. In fact, in sociology, it's a nice little $12 word called cognitive dissonance. It's that uncomfortable feeling when you don't know what's happening, and so you do everything in your power to make the sensations around you, what you're experiencing, fit a narrative of some kind. And our culture provides those narratives, our education provides those narratives, all those different types of things. So the belief in the paranormal, whether it's specifically ghosts, whether it's angels, whatever that may be, allows us to have a place to organize those experiences that don't fit anyplace else. One of the interesting consistencies that we see cross-culturally and of the type of structures that are playing out is the more bifurcated a culture is and a society is. In other words, very good, bad, yes, no. I mean, everything is very rigid. What we tend to see is their idea of spirits or ghosts tend to also be very not as benevolent as some other cultures. And that's that idea, because if you have a heaven and hell dichotomy, ghosts don't fit that dichotomy, right? So they're not in that structure, so that isn't comfortable. If it's a culture that the narrative is more broad in terms of religion, there's more of a continuum of acceptable belief structures. You tend to see ghosts or spirits as just part of your everyday existence. It's not as, quote, paranormal. It's just not normal. And so there's that distinction that we see in terms of culturally. Interestingly enough, there's been a lot of research lately on the paranormal in the United States and why it's kind of taken off in the last 20 years or so. And recently, sociologists have focused on these trends in the U.S. and particularly the impact of media and social media on this. Back in the really 2002, that we saw this massive influx of what was referred to as reality TV, paranormal TV, the factual paranormal, ghost hunters, all that started coming. But that coincided with something that we see cross-culturally. A decrease in people's satisfaction with traditional religious institutions. So you see this cross-culturally as people are more questioning of traditional religious institutions, churches, whatever that dominant religion might be. You see an increase in belief in paranormal that falls outside of the domain of those institutions. It's not that people are less spiritual or believe less in higher powers. It's that they aren't satisfied with the answers that the institutions are giving them, so they gravitate towards that. And we're seeing that exact same trend in the United States. We see far more people identify as spiritual and not religious. Far less people have religious affiliation, and far more people are now open to the idea of ghosts and spirits and the paranormal. So this is true even more so of millennials and the younger generation. They are the most disenfranchised, if you will, of those traditional structures that give us our ideas about what happens after life and what happens in that bifurcation of the body and the soul. So ultimately, what sociologists do is not whether or not, we don't ask that question, as I said, whether or not ghosts are real, but we look rather as it as a mechanism, one of many that society has, but one that allows society to be ordered, to allow us to answer those questions that we might not have answers to in other institutions. In modern society, this becomes far more complex, right, as we know more things, and disenchantment with traditional institutions to account for unexplainable things as we gain more knowledge and we gain more understanding. The paranormal and ghosts and those types of things allow people to conceptualize their world and make sense of things that traditionally weren't made sense of. So I'm not really here to say that they don't exist, because it's a belief structure, and beliefs aren't really inherently testable, but what we find is as we gain more knowledge, we have just as many questions sometimes as answers, and that is the way that society tends to progress culturally around these things. And we've seen this many times in history, and these consistencies are cross-cultural. It's not just happening here, it happens all over. So that's my little spiel at the beginning. So.
Well, thank you. Wendy?
I have not written, but typed stuff, so I'll stand up.
Yeah, have the mic.
Yes, I'll have the mic. I can talk pretty well, pretty loud, but I will use the mic anyway, away from the paper. Hello, everybody. I'm Wendy, and I'm one of the lead investigators of the Paranormal Investigators of North Dakota. Our team members, Roger Allard, Stephanie Pinky, and Brian Hunsinger, have been working together roughly 3 years now. This last year, we have focused on investigating locations on the west side of North Dakota. Some locations include the James Memorial Arts Center, the Old Memorial, also in Williston. And we've traveled as far south as the Billings County Museum in Medora. This summer, we also had the privilege of investigating here on campus at Hartnett Hall and Old Main. So why do we do what we do? We all have some kind of link to the paranormal, either as an adult or as a child, an experience or a haunting memory. As a child, I remember being able to see, pick up, and sense spirits, being visited by family members during the night that had passed, that come to me and woke me up in the middle of the night to let me know that they were moving on. I remember phone calls in the morning. My mom, gonna get emotional. My mom coming to my door, and she looks at me and she's like, "You know, don't you?" And I'm like, "Yep." Okay, back to focus. So spirit has been around me all of my life, so there's that. We're all born with this ability, but so many of us are told that there's no such a thing. If you see an imaginary friend, or you see a spirit or ghost, your parents just tell you, "Oh, it's just your imagination, quit making up stories, just hush, 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 hush," and eventually you learn to block those things out. Because our team's experience and abilities, we are driven to pursue validation for our clients, help them through our investigations. Our group has a passion for the paranormal, and our focus is to not only help the living, but those who have passed. So what exactly is paranormal? She kind of touched on this a little bit. Paranormal is something that is not scientifically explained. It's said that more than 1/3 of the population in the U.S. believe or have had an experience of something paranormal. Where does this belief system come from? Is it influenced by the mass pop culture of horror movies, TV series like Ghost Hunters and Paranormal Lockdown? Due to the exposure and acceptance of all the unexplained in this area is now common as we're talking about the weather. But the openness to discuss ghosts and spirit link back as far as mankind itself. One of the earliest religions, Manism, or a folk religion, his belief system is that spirit or energy force is in everything, whether it's a rock, a tree, a building, even an event or an emotion has an energy or a spirit behind it. There are also links to the same in belief systems in shamanism, Buddhism, Hindu, as well as Christian-based religions. Each of these believe that the spirit, ghost, or energy carries on after a person's body dies. Depending on the belief system, determines what happens to this energy. But the common link is that we are seen in this real world, in the living world, and then there's an unseen spirit world. Gotta switch my paper. Like I said, got a few of them. In Madagascar, they celebrate with their deceased in an event called Turning of the Bones, where they remove the deceased loved ones from the grave, rewrap them in fresh clothing, spray them with wine or perfume, then dance with their deceased at their gravesides to live music. It is a day of remembering their loved ones and renew their family ties. Then they return them back to their grave. Their belief system is that once the body completely decays, the spirit is then able to move on. In Mexico, they celebrate the Day of the Dead. It is a time to celebrate and reunite with their past loved ones with food, drinks, and music during the time October 31st to November 2nd, according to this tradition that also has deep roots in the Catholics' All Saints' Day, that the gates of heaven open up for the loved ones to come through and visit back with their loved ones on earth. Around the world, different cultures and religions believe that our spirit, soul, energy, or ghost move on through after their body dies. If this is true, according to science, energy cannot die. So where does that energy go then after the body dies? Quantum theory has proven that our energy moves from our body after our body dies. So depending on your belief system, whether you go to heaven or hell, that is if you're good or bad. Some religions believe and say that they can travel to different planes. Some move from place to place to watch over their families and loved ones. Or some say if they die a tragic death, they are left there on earth to finish and complete unfinished tasks. While other spirits stay and are there because they're attached to a location or an object. So what do I believe? Yes, they are here and they're with us at all times. Some come and go to visit loved ones. Some are attached to a location or an object, and some are just needing help. Through my long life experiences and evidence collected with the team members, I can say with no question, there is spirit and energy around us. So where did all this woo-woo, thought you guys would like that term, where did all this woo-woo research start? Paranormal groups can be traced back as far as 1862. The Ghost Club is known to be the first paranormal group whose roots came from Cambridge University when a group of like-minded students got together to discuss ghosts and psychic phenomenon. History of the paranormal in the U.S. The Warrens, which I'm sure there's a few of you out there who are familiar with the Warrens, founded the New England Society for Psychic Research in 1952 with their goals, much like ours, to help people understand the unexplained. Ed and Lauren Warren were pioneers in investigating and documenting cases from demonic possessions to spirit activity. Sadly, we lost Lorraine this year at the age of 92. The Warrens' most well-known documented cases have inspired movies like The Amityville Horror, A Haunting in Connecticut, and the Conjuring series. They also started an occult museum in Connecticut. In their lives, they had documented over 10,000 cases. Some say that some of the cases were fabricated, while others have been documented with the Catholic Church. Either way, the two of them are the most influential investigators in the world of paranormal. So what do we do, the paranormal team? When we get contacted by somebody who has activity in their business or home, we actually normally don't try and pick up a lot on what they're experiencing. We'll go in there with the business or the homeowners. We'll talk with them. We'll go in. We'll do a baseline reading. We'll get a feel for what the location is. A couple of us can pick up on spirit and energy that's there. We'll do an EMF sweep, which if you guys are familiar with EMFs, it's a tool that picks up electromagnetic fields. We'll do a sweep with those. Once we have gathered all that information, we then present it to the house or the business owner. Then the business owner will share with us, and hopefully we can validate some of the things that we found and what they found. After we do that, we'll go ahead and set up a base camp, and we'll dig out all of our equipment. This is just a small sampling of it. We work with EMF detectors, like I said. They show electromagnetic fields. We work with EVP sessions, which is electronic voice phenomenon. We use digital recorders for that. Full spectrum cameras that pick up light fields that your normal eye can't pick up on. I'm losing my place here. Thermal cameras that pick up temperature readings. SLS cameras, if you guys are familiar with the Kinect system, video game system where you're standing there and it picks up your body and you can swing a golf cue or bowl. This system can also get hooked up to a laptop, and it can pick up spirit activity. When we were at the James Memorial, Roger actually picked up a spirit of a child with me and communicating with me. So we were standing at the top of the stairs. I go up to the child and I have my hand holding out. The child actually reaches its hand up and is holding my hand. He actually took a picture of it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to test it at this point to see if we're actually getting an intelligent spirit or if it's just a fluke. So as I'm walking away, leaving my hand behind me, that little girl's spirit actually lifts her hand up as I'm walking away, and as we get to the distance that we can no longer separate, or that we're separating, she actually drops her hand down and moves down to the stairs. So it's a really cool piece of evidence, really cool tool that we get to use. Thermocam spirit boxes. If you guys see some of the TV shows that are, people are hearing that crackle, 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 and you ever wants to hear some, Bob, something like that. We have several pieces of that, or several of those that we use for investigations as well. Once we get all that stuff set up, we normally take a break, leave the building, because it's nice for the energy and stuff to settle for about 30 minutes to half an hour. 30 minutes to half, that's the same thing. I don't math. So once we do that, then we let the energy settle, and we go back, we'll go grab coffees or whatever that we need to have an all-nighter. And then we start our investigation normally between 10 and stop about 2:30 or 3 in the morning then. So during our investigations at Minot State University, firstly at Hartnett Hall, we picked up on some phantom footsteps, unexplained light orb traveling across, Roger picked that one up, traveling across the stage, Elshire stage. The boys, you and Britton both picked up a shadow person on the 3rd floor moving from north to south on the west wing. We picked up, this is a good one. So I don't know if most of you know that Hartnett Hall back in the 90s, late 90s, Bill, it had a fire. So theater kids were having a haunted house, and somebody had a malfunction with some lighting, so let's just say that, and burnt down their stage. So we were out of commission for how many months? 3-4 months at least. I didn't tell the team members that there was a fire in the building. I just let them go in. I wanted them to experience it themselves. A couple hours into the night, some of us girls were on the east side, east wing, and the girls were like, I smell smoke. And I'm like, I don't smell nothing. And then meanwhile, on the 2nd floor, the boys were like, I smell smoke and damp wood. And they're like, I don't understand. And meanwhile, they were holding and working with the EMF detector, which also has a temperature gauge on it. Well, this EMF detector fluctuates a little bit here and there if energy is around, but this sucker went up to 103, and and the temperature gauge, which normally we get like maybe 5 degrees up or down, it actually spiked to 598 degrees and stopped. Now, it wasn't hot in the building. They didn't feel hot, but we've had this equipment for years, We replace batteries regularly. There's no scientific reason why this would have that kind of experience. So it's just some minor kind of fun things that we picked up at Hartnett Hall. There's lots more, plus at Old Main, but I'll kind of stop there because I'm sure I'm probably way past my time at this point. I'm like, talk spooky stuff all day.
Well, thank you very much. That's all very compelling. So, who would like to start the dialogue, the questioning? Anybody have any comments they'd like to make? I need to move away from that speaker. Anybody like to make a comment? Well, if not, let me.
We have a question right here.
Okay.
Hi, I have a question. We're talking about spirits attached to places and things, and sometimes they need help. Can you expand about when spirits need help?
Yes, so I have picked up on spirits of children and an elderly woman at one point in time that just needed help moving on. Sometimes spirits don't know that they've died, that they've passed. And the little girl just needed to reconnect with her mother. And with working with the energy spirit and everything, I'm able to help move them on, connect them with their family. So.
How about guardian angels? Do you have any evidence that, why do some incidences or events, maybe people will explain it, that was my guardian angel that brought me through that situation? Have you had any explanation to, back that up?
Not really defined explanation other than if you have a religious background. I think most of us have guardian angels, past loved ones that are watching over and protecting us. So I just think that that's kind of a part of what's out there.
Okay. Here we have a question.
Well, if there's not a ton of other questions, what did you find at Old Main? I know as a former MSU student, and I know a lot of us are here.
My office is in that building.
Yeah, yeah. I had you as a teacher. Oh yeah, heck yeah. I want to know more.
About that one too.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So this is my scratchy notes of, this was like a couple months ago, and I'm old, and I'm like, what happened there again? And they like start talking about, oh yeah, that was a good one. So we not only talked within our own group, but we also talked with a lot of the security that worked out of Hartnett Hall and Old Main. And if you want some good stories, talk to them too. They have, almost all of them have experienced stuff, especially with the new cameras and stuff that have been put in. Even the dome, they actually have a video of unexplained lights moving back and forth through one of the lower areas. I don't know where the racquetball courts are or something, up and down the hallways, which is really cool. But, okay, I'll focus. Okay. So rumors, there's a man that looks like Colonel Sanders and a small child, a boy around 10 years old. The boy likes to play with a ball. Numerous theater students have experienced and seen them, as well as some of the security staff. So they're definitely active. People have also said that they see them in Hartnett Hall, and I do feel that they can move back and forth and travel. So they're definitely there. This was one that was like getting late at night. This is on you and me, Stephanie. We were downstairs in the music department, and it was like, activity off and on, and all of a sudden we were walking down one of the dark hallways, and all of a sudden a light pops on in one of the music rooms, and we're like, that wasn't on, right? And we're like, no, it's not one of those like sensor lights that you have to, so that was one that we were like, that is interesting. We'll just go quickly upstairs.
And then it went off.
Yeah, and then as soon as we said that, we're like, it went bloop. They're like, ha, we scared you, nanner. So we had a really, really high EMF spike at 2 different locations. One was one of the main offices in kind of the U shape downstairs in the music area. So if you're coming down the lockers and cutting this way to go back up the stairs, there's an office right there. super, super high spike there. We actually picked up, I don't know how to explain it. It was almost like a rippling effect, right, guys? It almost sounded like in the ceiling tiles or something, there was like a rippling or a shifting. There's no vents or anything up there, so that's kind of an interesting, unexplained. Uncomfortable feeling walking up into the balcony area. Infrared camera, ooh, this is a good one too. So Stephanie, whenever we do investigations, if you guys aren't following our page, follow us on Facebook, Paranormal Investigators of North Dakota. Do it now. But when we do our investigations, we normally, if we can, we do live feeds. So you guys can actually interact with what we're doing. It's like watching Ghost Hunters, except more boring. Because a lot of times it's us sitting in the dark. Stephanie are like, did you make that cookie recipe? Yeah, I tried. I screwed it up. I don't know what's wrong. But that's the life. But we actually picked up, I don't know if we actually recorded it or if it got picked up, but she was holding her cell phone doing a live feed. I was sitting next to her, and she had, can you hear me all the way up there? Hear me? Stephanie, you might come up here and hold up the camera. I'm going to put her on pressure right here. So this is the thermal camera. It picks up heat signatures, and she was holding it basically like but pointing towards me down the hallway, so towards where the elevator is. She had her phone here, and she was doing the live feed, and she was like, oh, blah, 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 we're doing this. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I just seen a female, completely silhouetted female, shift and move, almost like she was moving into the elevator shaft. I'll just show you guys kind of like what it looks like. Like you can see different temperatures and stuff. Okay, something else really intense, which we don't. We're pretty brave group. We've been investigating in a lot of places. I've only seen Stephanie run out of building really, really fast once. And actually Roger did that in Old Main. He was up where the catwalk is. I don't know if he even got all the way up there. But it was dark, and he was just like, okay, I'm going to go up here. I'm brave. He's got his flashlight, and he's good to go. And next thing you know, I hear him go, thump, 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 thump. I'm like, Roger, what's wrong? His face is white. He's like, Mom. They call me Mama Ghost. Mom, no. I'm like, what's wrong? I seen myself, and I called my name out. So that's kind of an intense doppelganger type incident, which normally those aren't very friendly.
So is there a history of this? Is that what took you to the building in the first place?
No, actually, I was contacted by Mr. Bill Harbort.
Wendy, we have a question here. Right here. Wendy, right here.
Yes.
Sorry, nervous.
No, you're good.
I'm Jerica, and I. Anyway, I've worked in Hartnett Hall for a while. Like, I usually pull all-nighters in there, especially on the second floor. I haven't seen anything.
You haven't seen anything?
Other than that Darth Vader thing that keeps getting moved. One time someone moved it into the bathroom.
The elevator was the worst. You walk into the elevator and Darth Vader's standing like this over you. Do you remember Takama? Student Takama?
What?
Do you remember Takama? He was a student here a few years ago.
Oh, I've heard of that person.
Okay. Second floor, he actually heard footsteps a lot back and forth up and down the hallway there. Yeah.
Anyone ever double-checked to see if it's another student?
Yep, he did. He checked it out, and he chased down, and he ran out because he swore up and down it was a student, but he looked, and there was nobody there.
Maybe that explains why I've never noticed anything. I always just think, maybe it's someone else.
And that's possible.
So is it mostly the theater part? That was a broadcasting major.
I've heard broadcasting department too has had some uncomfortable feelings. I don't know if there's any definite like activity there, but energy's everywhere. Everybody knows that if you're in a great mood one day and you're by somebody who's really grumpy and all of a sudden that energy is kind of getting rubbed off on you, that energy can stay in locations too. So if your classroom is just crap one day, you know, that crap energy stays there. And our team actually offers clearings of locations as well to help remove some of that negative stagnant energy, to help kind of clear and make things bright and shiny again.
Okay, I have another question over here, Wendy.
I don't know if it's just me or if other people have experienced this too, but when I was approximately 7, 8 years old, I was in Texas with my family and we were going up in an elevator, but I heard something was kind of telling me not to go in the elevator. So I kind of freaked out and ran out of the building. Within the next couple days, we found out that the elevator had collapsed. So has anyone else had that kind of experience?
Yep. Yep. Premonition dreams happen all the time. I have an example. I was in Denver, staying at my brother's house for a weekend. I woke up from a really vivid, detailed dream, and I was telling my brother, I was like, yeah, for some reason, my husband was driving your wife's blue Jeep down this curve in this hill, and it was sideswiped by this red car, and he rolled off the edge of the hill. Just as I was finishing this story, he got a phone call. He looked at me, and he turned white. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? My wife, Jo, just got ran off the hill that you described in her Jeep by a blue car. So exactly what I had just told him, his wife told him. So yeah, things like that happen, and they're valid.
Oh, got another question back here. Hold on just a second.
Eddie, how do you know an EMF is a spirit and not just electricity?
What we do, like I said, when we do an investigation, I'm drawing a blank. We go in and like hit it up by every outlet, every place we possibly can. If we're hitting a high spike in the middle of a room, it's not likely that it's an outlet or electricity from something else. Unless we have super high spikes, we normally, if it's just a few things here and there. We've had Roger smiling at me because we had a really good incident on a home on North Hill. So a mom got a hold of us, said that she's had some activity in their home. Roger was in one of the little girls' rooms. She had one of the high bunk beds with a play area underneath. He was, did you have spirit box that time too, or were you just, okay. So he had the spirit box and the EMF. And within a square foot, it would spike. He would move it out of that square box, and it would completely diminish. He'd move it back, and it would roll and spike again. So I came in there, and I was like, okay, let's figure this out. We started talking to the spirit, and I was like, okay, we're going to debunk this. This has got to be some kind of electric outlet or something underneath in the basement. I was like, go ahead and go downstairs, and we'll try and debunk what we're doing. And he gets up. He's like, okay, if you want me to not go, if you want me to stay in here, make that hit 30. It started climbing up to 30. Okay, well, if you don't want, I don't even remember how high did you, 75, I think is what the last one. And he started getting up, going to the door, and you hear the click of the door, and I was like, you better hurry up because he's leaving. On cue, that sucker spiked 100. Meanwhile, he went downstairs, and there was nothing but hardwood floors underneath where we were located. So they definitely communicate with us through that and let us know that they're around. And like us to chase them. Union Annex building, we were chasing them around a whole gaming station one night. They like to sit in this one chair. Stephanie actually picked up a photo, a mist figure of an outline of a man. And we go by that location, it would spike. As soon as we walked by it and go back, it was gone. We turned around, it was behind us. So it was like playing chase behind us as we were going through.
We have a question over here.
Okay.
I have 2 questions. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So for you, you said there's a little boy and Colonel Sanders?
Colonel Sanders looking man. That's how he's been described.
In Old Main?
Yep.
Does that necessarily mean that they passed there? Or
No, spirits travel. It could be, related to the land even before the buildings were there.
Okay.
They could be from anywhere.
And then
So-
Dr. Jeannette, am I correct? Yeah. I have a question for you. Yeah. A lot of scientists, maybe they want to pursue this kind of paranormal research, but they do it in fear of, they don't do it because they fear of being labeled a kook or labeled something other than, a peer-reviewed or author or peer-reviewed scientist and stuff like that. They avoid it. Do you think in the future, maybe 5, 10 years, we're going to be able to drift away from that rigid scientific method we have in science and be able to actually explore these things on an intellectual and academic level?
Well, I think we already are. Historically, if you look culturally and historically, primarily one of the first real institutions of quote-unquote higher learning was churches and the religious institutions of different cultures. And they would explore this too. What's interesting now, as she said, quantum physics, a lot of astrophysics and things like that, and even in the social sciences and things like that, there are number of peer-reviewed research articles now. What happens is that as I said before, that disillusionment with traditional institutions leads people to explore alternative explanations for those stimuli and those experiences that we have in the environment that we can't inherently conceptualize with what we have and what we know currently. So that's where we get, all the advancements in all sciences, is people thinking outside the box and looking at things. And if you look at the progression of knowledge, that's a fairly common thing. And as I said, the trending in the United States, more and more people are not tethered to the traditional institutions. They're redefining institutions, not just our spirituality, but also institutions like family, institutions like education are being redefined. And those redefinitions are going to lead to different ways of viewing things.
A question over here.
Hi, okay, so there's a theory that says too that when like a really tragic event happens, it messes with the electromagnetic fields, and it's almost like it hits record and it records what happened and then it plays it like every single night or something like that, which explains why like spirits will do repetitive things. So it's not necessarily a spirit, but it's more like an imprint of what was left. Do you think that that is a possibility?
Yes, absolutely. For instance, the banker. So, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad experience that he had, but the Tabby Museum, before it was the Tabby Museum, was a bank. And personal story again, I was teaching a class in the lower gallery. If you guys are familiar with the Tabby, there's 2 classes downstairs. I was on the one right at the bottom of the stairs. I had 2 little girls in there. The parents were coming late. The Tabby was not open for the day, so anybody coming through that front door should be a parent. So I'm standing facing the door, watching the little girls joking around, having a good conversation with them. I hear the bell at the top of the door ring. So I'm like, okay, girls, get your stuff ready. There's a parent coming. So I look up. I see a man in a trench coat and a fedora hat come down the stairs. There's a landing right before you hit the bottom 3 stairs. And then he hits that landing. We make eye contact. I'm like, okay, girls, let's go. Just as I say that, the man comes down the last 3 steps and goes directly to the right. I'm thinking, okay, we're close. I'm talking to this man. He's running from me, so he's up to no good. So I'm starting to panic and worry about these little girls. So I'm like chasing him. The little girls are following me out the door. I'm like, excuse me, sir, we are not open. Is there something that I can help you with? Now, this man was as solid as each and every one of you are. I could not see through him. The girls, he was a solid man. We were physically chasing him and yelling at him down. He hangs the next right. If you're familiar, like I said, with the Tabby, there's like a wall that kind of separates the lower gallery. In the back right-hand corner, there is the night deposit box. There's a big safe in the wall. And my only thought is that he must have been going on his nightly routine to check that night deposit box. He had disappeared at this point because he was not there. And at this point, I'm like, oh my God, he's really going to be, what's going on? Little girls, I'm like, get back in your room, get back in the room, shut the door. And yeah, he just wasn't there. So yeah, residual energy is definitely out there. During those, I've seen full body apparitions like that 3 times probably in the last 10 years. And of course, I don't have any equipment with me, but they're solid enough that you second guess that they're not a real person.
This one's for you, Professor. With the perspective that you have of our beliefs serve a purpose for us,
Yeah.
how does that affect like how valid you see your own beliefs, or like the cognitive dissonance thing? How do you
There's an on-running joke in sociology. My upper students hear it all the time, that it's the discipline where you never fully enjoy anything ever again, because you do second guess a lot of times. We learn that our social interactions throughout our history inform and cue us to everything that we're experiencing. So one of the things is that you said before that a lot of young children talk about seeing, people or hearing things or interacting, and as we get older, that goes away. The same thing is true with imagination. The same thing can be argued with creativity, because what happens is our social experiences in the society that we're in condition us not to validate those thoughts or those intuitions. If you go to other cultures, however, they don't do that. And so that's where you see those differences cross-culturally. One of the things in sociology that we do is we believe in cultural relativism. And that means that all our interactions, all our knowledge, all our understanding, all our experiences are filtered through these dialogues that we've had in the past, and that shapes how we perceive things. So if you're inclined to believe in angels or in ghosts, you're more likely to see them than if you're not, because you're more open to interpreting the stimuli around you through that lens. What's interesting is individually, if you go to a sociologist, you'll get the spectrum of whether or not they believe in higher powers or angels or ghosts or anything like that. But we also understand that beliefs aren't testable. There's no proof with a capital P to illustrate. We have evidence, we have inclinations, whether or not that's, as you said before, just electricity that's an anomaly in the atmosphere, or if it's a spirit, that is a little bit more open to our interpretation and requires more evidence and more understanding.
So do you feel you can completely close yourself off from something if you're afraid of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I alluded to it in my opening remarks, but depending on how the culture believes in the afterlife, very much will influence whether or not you see these spirits as guardian angels, whether or not you see them as benevolent. One of the interesting things in American culture is, because of also what Wendy alluded to, the social media of the horror movies and things like that, we tend to conceptualize them as not being overtly friendly, where other cultures have beliefs where no, they're there our whole lives and they're there to help us, and there's nothing, malicious, intense, or anything like that. That's just our history and our ancestors behind us. So it's very much how a culture, the narrative they provide to interpret things that we can't quite cognitively process, or we don't have an understanding for yet.
I have a question here.
Have you ever been to any hospitals or anything like that? I'm a nurse, and I've heard lots of stories, and I've actually had patients that have said, I saw somebody laying on the floor next to my bed, and then talked to some of the other nurses that have been there a long time, and they said, yeah, someone died there, and then the spouse died shortly thereafter while they were visiting, and patients are telling us they see these things, and there are different patients in the room. Have you ever been to a hospital and explored anything like that?
We have not done an investigation at a hospital, but just, I think anybody who has intuitiveness senses them around us when you go to locations like that, definitely.
Wendy, I have a question for you. I'm Katie, and I am the admin in humanities in Hartnett Hall. And I don't know if I should say this out loud, but I'm in that building a lot alone. When Bill told me that you were going to be there, I had told a friend of mine who also works on campus, whose sister was a theater student in the mid-2000s. And so Jenny texted her sister Jill and said, I'm going to put you in contact with her. So Jill contacted me and asked me to ask you if you met Billy. Billy apparently, and I don't know if Chris Stroshine has heard of Billy at all, but she said Billy is a little boy that hangs out in the catwalk in Hartnett Hall. So Roger, did you meet Billy?
Most likely.
Yep, and then she said they would have rehearsals sometimes, and they all turned around one time, and there was a lady standing there in a black dress. And they were like, is she part of the cast? And then she was gone.
Yeah, so the lady in the black dress has been seen by a friend of mine who was in the theater department as well. She was getting ready to get dressed for going on stage, and she went into the one bathroom that's just at that back entrance door, and she was struggling with her zipper. She was like, oh, I can't get this, and all of a sudden, her dress zipped. She looked in the mirror, and she seen the woman in the black dress, and she was like, swore a little bit and ran out of the dressing room as quick as she could.
The only thing that's happened to me when I've been in there is that I usually cut through the theater to get to the other side, because I do need to do stairs more often, but I don't. So I cut through the theater, and one time somebody needed a podium, so I was going backstage, and I turn on the house lights, and then I go backstage, and I was fiddling to find I opened the big heavy door really, really wide, and I was going to fiddle with the light switch, and right before I turned it on, the door slammed shut. I forgot the podium, and I took off. I don't cut through the theater anymore. So that was my only incident. Other than I thought our old ancient copier was haunted, but I think everybody in the humanities department probably knows what I'm talking about. It made noises all the time.
Yeah, there are stories from other like Hartnett Hall students too about the catwalk, that their jackets get pulled to the point where they're like, what do you want? Turn around and try to see who's playing a joke on them, and nobody's there. Or they've been tapped on the shoulder up there as well, and it's probably the little boy that we talked about. So
yeah, I try to keep my eyes averted from the catwalk. But
we have a comment or question back here.
Hi. You mentioned earlier about how people tend to gravitate towards something that can give them answers. And so that's why, especially in this country, we're seeing a lot of younger people become more disillusioned with institutions like religion. And I was just wondering, historically, religion tends to offer answers like, what happens after I die? And religion will say, this is what happens. Why did this event occur? And religion will say, this is why that event occurred. So my question is, why do you think we're seeing this move away from institutions that typically do offer answers towards these beliefs that don't necessarily offer answers? Because a lot of even tonight, a lot of the comments are, well, have you ever seen this, and what does that mean? There's a lot of questions about it, but there's not really a lot of answers there. So it kind of seems counterintuitive that people would be moving that way, away from something that looks like it offers a lot more answers than the other.
Well, let me clarify. We're still a very religious society. Do not get me wrong on that. But the trending is that those traditional institutions that are viewed to be more rigid and dogmatic in their structures are not as appealing to younger generations. And what we see is that tendency is not so much as that they're trying to attain an answer. It's that the answers that they've been provided in the traditional institutions aren't satisfying. So they're looking to alternatives to possibly answer the question. So it's not a matter of this provides answers or gives us a clarity necessarily. It's that it's more appealing to us or makes more sense to our real world experiences and those sensory inputs that weren't being explained in those other places. Yeah, it's That's why sociology is so interesting, is because it's a very, very complex thing, right? And what happens is you're always going to have someone that doesn't like the answers, regardless of what, historically it always happens. You always have the one cave guy who doesn't want to, sleep on a rock. He wants to sleep on the leaves. Or you have the one person who questions, why is it that priests can't marry? Or you have, and that's the way society progresses, is that you question the old and try to find an alternative to that existing structure. Right now, what's so interesting about American culture in general is that we have a dramatic demographic shift that's happening. So our millennials and Gen Z, which is next, are going to outnumber very shortly the generation that has been in control of the institutions for a really, really long time. So this, again, this questioning of, well, these are institutions set up by people that we don't agree with on so many levels, that we're going to find alternative answers to these questions that they haven't provided, if that makes sense.
Okay, I have another question here.
Hi again. This is kind of two-part. Have you ever experienced a malevolent spirit? And then, by extension, have you ever had a spirit follow you home?
Just my husband. In the years that we've been investigating, we've only come across a few negative energies, and we do our best to help the homeowners remove those. But yeah, I think we've all at some point in time have brought some friends home that we don't necessarily want to. But after the first year or so, I'm pushing everybody, and we're using protection through Reiki. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Reiki at all. Okay. Reiki is an ancient Japanese technique that works with higher energies. And I'm a Reiki master, and I wanted to teach my young Padawagans how to protect themselves during investigations, because I would always have to clear them after and do the protection before, and do you have your crystals, and do you have all your protection stuff? And no, I forgot. So yeah, we're all learning. It's baby steps, and every time it's something different.
So that being said, with the, sorry to just jump on.
No, you're
all
good.
the time, but being said, for someone that's closed off and isn't welcoming things, because that's me. I'm like, no bad juju. Don't bring me to haunted houses. I'm very anxious about things.
Yep.
So would I not be able to see Billy? Like if I'm in Hartnett Hall and I'm, it's clearly other people have seen him, but because I'm closed off and I'm scared or anxious or just don't understand it, could I keep it away just because I'm not welcoming or trying to recognize that there's a spirit or something else around me?
Most of the time, if you're blocked, I work with the third eye. That's where most people bring their intuitiveness into. If you completely have your third eye closed off and you have those blinders on, Bill, you're less likely to pick up and experience those. But you can learn to open and work with your third eye and be able to develop those abilities to be able to see and experience things too.
We have a question over here.
This is for Dr. Lartius. So is there any possibility of separating the paranormal from religion, like from folk religion or Christianity, or is it still deeply rooted into it that you can't just do it?
The short answer to that is no, because we are talking, because if you look at all the major religions of the world, if you look at the non-major religions of the world, if you look at paranormal, their underlying purpose and their underlying function is to explain the unexplainable and and talk about those things that we elevate above the everyday mundane. So the short answer is no. The longer answer to that is that it is far more complex, because every different belief structure has idiosyncratic elements to it that make it look very different at any given moment. One of the things in sociology that we try to look is get beyond the concrete manifestations of any one social institution and look at the commonalities across cultures. And things like society is always organized in groups, dominantly in family groups by lineage. And there's a number of reasons why that is. One of the other human universals to culture is some kind of understanding of what happens to us after we die. And that can look radically different from culture to culture, but it's doing the same function, is filling in those gaps, if you will, in our understanding of the world around us.
Okay, we have a question here.
Not a fan of my voice on the microphone, but whatever. You mentioned earlier, I don't know if you use the term cleansing or cleaning, but I would imagine somebody that's freaked out and has a, quote, malevolent spirit in their house, they're probably looking for hope. So can you explain in detail, like, what that entails when you offer a cleansing, I think is the word you used?
Yeah, so we do, there's different terms for it: smudging, saging, clearing. It's all basically the same thing. When I do it, I try and have a team. Sometimes Stephanie will go with me. Whoever the home or business owners, I will put them to work as well. I will go in first, and Tamara can attest to this as well. I will go into the location and I will use Reiki, and I will remove a lot of that stagnant energy that's collected on there. And once you start really, if it's a home that's been there for a really, really long time, you're going to pull and you're going to pull and you're going to pull. And you can actually, as you're starting to pull all this negative stagnant energy and stuff out, you can actually start feeling the people who aren't necessarily in tune to picking up on energy. They can actually go through the room and they can feel it. It's almost like spider webs, or I've heard it described as spaghetti. But I'll go in and I'll do that. I'll remove all that negative energy, all that stagnant energy. Then I'll go in and I will use a Reiki symbol. There's a Reiki symbol that we use for protection. I'll do that on all four walls, the ceiling and the floor as well. We'll go in then behind using, I'm gonna grab some stuff over here, sage. And this little dish, we basically just light it, kind of like an incense, and then you go around each corner of the house and remove some of that. There are different types. Some are used for removing negative energy. Some are just to bring in positive, happy energy. There's so many different types that bring in different things. Palo Santo is another one. It's a wood that you can use to bring in. Once we do that, then I also like to go in behind, because the mic's getting weird. The medicine man that I work with, he was talking to me about all the clearings and stuff that I've been doing lately. He's like, "But Wendy, what are you doing? What are you using the burning sage for?" And I was like, "Well, because I'm doing the clearing." He was like, "You're a water sign. Fire and water don't mix. You're coughing, you're choking, it's getting," I'm like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." So I make the business owner, or Stephanie, do this part. And then I'll go in behind her, and there's a liquid form, a sage as well, that I'll go in behind and bring that all.
So, just to follow up to that, I don't need to do you keep in contact with the homeowners and people, and do they ever say, "Well, you did this and it was gone for a couple of weeks, but now we got a problem again"?
I have had one location on North Hill. They had a very negative spirit there. I've been back there a couple times and cleared again. But the thing is, she's intuitive, her son is intuitive, and her daughter is an empath. So because they are all bringing in energy, picking up energy, spirits, wherever they go, wherever they walk, whoever they're around, they're bringing all that back into their house again. So that's just going to be a continual teaching them and working with them on how to clear and work through that themselves. Good question.
What led you to the crystals and the sage and stuff like that? I don't remember the word that you used.
Oh, Reiki?
Yeah. What led you to that against a priest using an exorcism?
That's kind of the next step. If what I do with Reiki and clearing doesn't have the impact that it does, and we feel that it is a benevolent. Yes, that, I can't talk today. If I feel that I'm not able to connect and get what's in there out after trying once or twice, I'll suggest to them to contact a priest and have them come in and bless the house, so. Yeah. There is a church on North Hill that does send me people to do clearings and stuff in their house too, so.
Somebody who's not asked 15 questions already, over here.
So you've talked about like going to places and doing readings, like the school and stuff, and so people get you to come to their place and do the readings, but what is your typical like response? Like, how did you respond to the spirits at the school? Is it just you go in and you do the readings and it's like, okay, there are spirits here, look, they're spirits, or do you actually have a response that you do in like reaction to the spirits, unless like even if they're like not negative and like harmful towards other people?
It depends on the location. Some people want it completely gone. Others become attached to the spirits that are in their home and they want to keep them. So we just kind of work with them and kind of see what they want. If there's a spirit that needs to be moved on, we will help them move on. So, but it just depends on the business. Or
would you be able to tell us what you did with the spirits on campus?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Because they weren't harming anything or anyone, and they were just kind of comfortable where they're at.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. We work with the wife of the head of security at MSU, and so she found out from him all these places, not just this, where some people like get pushed downstairs and stuff. Do you have to be asked to come and do this, or can you just say, well, that sounds interesting, I want to look into this, or?
Normally we get asked.
Okay.
But if there's a location, like Stephanie is our historian, she was hitting up a lot of locations that we were wanting to get into this summer especially. So she does contact a lot of like bigger scares in North Dakota, some of the top most haunted locations in North Dakota. We did get to go to Custer, Fort Totten. They didn't want us to tell anybody about that, so shh, I'm trusting you guys, don't tell nobody.
They just didn't want us to film.
Oh.
Like, they said that we could tell people.
Oh, okay.
Well, that was part of the second question, like San Haven, I keep hearing it's really haunted. Do you have to get permission or requested to go up there, or don't you?
I have gone up there myself. I had permission with a group that was up there. Our team hasn't gone up there yet. But yes, we are very respectful when we do investigations. We do not just like break our way into it. Yeah. Well, there are teams out there that are very disrespectful, and we do everything legit. We do try and debunk activity that people are, my Billings County Museum. The curator there, every time she'd go up in the courthouse area, she would get these weird flashing lights on the wall, and she was like, I don't know what's going on. So Stephanie and I went up there, and it took us probably half an hour taking pictures with the lights on, with the lights off, over this angle, whatever. Come to find out, she was picking up the reflection off of the plastic cover that was on the desk. So whenever we do investigations, we do try and debunk as much as we can. If we can't debunk things, then it's just kind of unexplained. So.
Got a question here, Wendy? Sorry, go first.
I was wondering, you
Sorry,
mentioned
Jared.
that a lot of kids tend to see things as more often than adults, and I was kind of wondering if you maybe had any connections between that and the fact that as humans we used to be apex predators, and over the many hundreds of years we've kind of degenerated from that. We no longer are the strongest predator, we're intelligent, so we created the tools that we can use to no longer have to be physically active 24/7. Does that possibly have any kind of connection to maybe an increase or a decrease in our own sensitivity to the paranormal or that kind of stuff?
I'm not sure. What do you think?
What we interestingly have found historically is that, and this is a terminology that as a cultural sociologist, I don't like the terminology, but quote unquote more primitive cultures, right? Those that are not as industrialized tend to have a more integrated spirit belief structure into their everyday life. Whether that is because they're with nature more often and there are more elements that they're conceptualizing versus the more sterilized, industrialized component. It's hard to pinpoint, but we do see that trend that as cultures become more industrialized, more specialized, you see that there's a drop in, well, one thing, drawn-out death rituals tend to go away. If you look historically, post-industrialization, our death rituals became far shorter and in a sense stagnant than other cultures. So some people hypothesize that industrialization or more, mechanical-based societies move away from that, but I'm not sure. It's still up for debate.
Okay, another question here.
So, what is your guys' range that you investigate?
Like how far out?
Just the general area, or I guess.
As far as we can. Yeah, if we get offered to go to Montana, Maine, wherever, we will go, as long as we have the means to. We are all hobbyists, basically. We have our own full-time jobs. We do this because we're passionate about it. We don't get paid for it. We buy our own equipment. Some of us have thousands of dollars worth of equipment that we buy out of our own pockets, so.
There was another question in my head. There was this place I heard of in Gladstone. I actually went there once. But was there ever anything you guys had to investigate there?
Roger?
That would be me. I was
Here.
with another paranormal.
Roger, here.
Dang it.
Roger, meet crowd. Roger.
Hello. It was actually the school there, the old school.
One of my friends lived there.
Yep. There's a family that owns it now. They moved to South Dakota, but the people that I was with, we went through and they were saying that there's an old guy that sits up and watches the kids play basketball in the old basketball place. And yeah, there's a lot of activity there. Nothing evil. It was mostly to help with the kids because the kids were intuitive.
Apparently these guys did not meet any friendly old man, but they also had I believe they had the place cleansed a couple of times.
Yeah, we cleansed it after we did our investigation. We also did find a pair of red glowing eyes up in the rafters, but yeah.
So you guys did see it.
I have another comment here.
Okay, so which elevator at Hartnett was haunted?
That was actually at Old Main. Old Main.
Which elevator? Because
The music department, lower level, yep. Yeah, we had another pretty sketchy incident that we were picking up on voices. So we were in the far corner, I don't know what end of the building it would be,
You have a comment over here too.
the northeast corner, would it have been that we were at? But there's a stairwell, there's the elevator, and then there's the stairwell. And us girls were hearing voices, and all of a sudden we heard banging. And we were like, that's got to be the boys. And we're like trying to find the boys, and meanwhile, they're like on the next floor coming down the stairwell, and they're like, did you guys make a bunch of noise? And did you like bang on the wall? And we're like, no.
Yeah, as we were coming down, we were all the way up where you could walk, and so like the next floor down, somebody was banging against the wall. So we
Yep.
went to go down, there's nobody there, and it'd be the next floor down.
Yep.
And we popped out, and you're like, were you banging into the wall? No. Were you guys
Giving the boys evil eye, like, what are you guys doing? You're supposed to be quiet.
Okay, over here.
Y'all mainly focus on ghosts, or are you like ever thinking about branching out, like Bigfoot?
Well, working with my Navajo medicine man, actually, he works a lot with the Squatchy people and Asterial beings as well. So, yes, sir.
Can I ask, are you invited to the native lands, or do you have to get consent from the people?
Yeah, we always have to get the okay.
Like when you mentioned the door and stuff, but I'm just thinking right now with oil and gas, people are
Yep.
digging up lands, and are they against you going on that land too?
I don't think we've really ran into any issues with it. We always try and get the okay and be very respectful of anything and everything that's around when we do it, so.
I have a question for Jeannette,
Yeah.
if I may. I know that's not really my role here.
No, that's okay.
But
Go ahead, Alex.
As we're moving away from formalized religion,
Mhm.
right, and more towards general purpose spirituality, do you see people, the ghosts and paranormal activities, more as negative or more as a positive, more as neutral? I really love watching these Japanese animated movies where everything has a spirit and mostly neutral or positive. There's some negative ones, but where do you see our culture going?
Well, if you look at a lot of if you go back historically and look at it, most of them are neutral, as you said, right? So most of the belief structures are neutral. And that seems to be where it's going. It's not necessarily, it's the equating to, well, in society there's good people, neutral people, and saints, right? And the same thing is true. So it is paralleling that. A lot of people are, again, as I said, it's not a reduction in spirituality, it's a reduction in religiosity, which is slightly different. And so as any society is questioning their existing institutions, they go back to institutions of the past, so shamanism, looking at other cultures and what their answers were to that. And we do that with any of our social institutions that are being called into question, whether it's government or family or anything like. We're going back to more extended family structures now too, where you have, multiple generations living in the same house for many reasons. So the same thing is true of any of our social institutions.
This is a really personal question for you, and you don't have to answer it. I don't want to put you on the spot. But from beginning when you started this work to now, how has that affected your spirituality?
It's definitely changed. I was born Methodist, confirmed Lutheran. But I always knew that there was something missing because I was always the weird kid, dressed weird. I was the goth kid in high school. Always talked to ghosts and spirits, and back in the 80s it wasn't acceptable. So, and I felt very pushed off back then. And I think through my explorations of where I'm at now, I've found that instead of constructed, man-made religion, I found natural, more spiritualist religion, if you want to define it as religion. I believe that there's a higher source, whether you want to call it God or Buddha, but I think that's kind of the direction that I am.
Just to follow up on that, that's the direction that we see culturally that people are going, is turning away from these more, as you said, man-made religions of, Catholicism or Judaism or Islam, and looking at these alternatives that are going back historically to see what they have to offer and answer those questions. So we do see that. That's the trend. Sorry to say, but you're typical of the trend.
I'm a trendsetter.
There you go, trend setting. Trend setting.
I had a question. Have you ever been invited to investigate battlefields, historical battlefields with a lot of energy, a lot of unresolved
Actually,
lives?
I will let you talk to Stephanie back here.
Oh, I have a microphone.
Everybody, Stephanie, say hi, Stephanie.
Okay, so usually with stuff like that, we usually call them to ask permission, of course. I love history. I love the historical aspect. Is it really loud? Okay, sorry. Gettysburg is like one of my lifelong dreams that I want to go to.
I just was having that in my mind because I'm from Pennsylvania originally. I just moved out here.
So
that is a big
yeah.
spot.
So the very, very, very first paranormal group that I was ever in was out of Fargo, and a friend of mine got me into that one. And she and some of her friends, I didn't get to go, but went to Gettysburg, and they went out on the battlefields, and they got lots of evidence. So like that's we're trying to like raise money so we can go do something like that, because like Wendy said, everything is out of our own pockets, and it's really hard to get out there. But yeah, that's like anywhere historical like that, we would, like a dream.
Wait, I was just going to add that in this area of the country, you have so many historical battles that took place just within less than 200 years. Yeah. So you don't need to even go necessarily out back east. You know, I just went to the battlefield of the
Little Bighorn, which was really striking because I've never been to a site like this where all the gravestones are not in one location, they're actually where the soldiers fell. So whether one believes in all this or not, I think just from human perspective is very striking. It just really highlights the dead and the horrible vibes that accompany them. But actually, can I ask a question? It might be a little personal, but so you said you're a trendsetter in terms of your religious beliefs. Does it make you question, though, you said that if you sometimes would refer them to Catholic priests, for instance, if a priest can come in and get rid of, potentially, hypothetically get rid of a spirit, does that make you more prone to perhaps Catholicism? Or how does that make you, I mean, why would priests be able to do it and say not another religion?
Because Catholicism is one of the few institutionalized religions that explicitly have rituals designed to deal with the paranormal, and they are explicitly designed to deal with malevolent entities. So most religions don't have an internal structure built around exorcism. Catholicism is one of a handful of organized religions that have those types of rituals.
We have one last question right there,
Yes,
right?
hi.
She's been waiting.
Hi, Wendy. I'm just curious if yourself or your team has ever encountered a spirit or higher being or however you want to put it that has literally drained you of all of your energy, like just communicated with you so strongly that you're just like nauseous, drained, whatever. Has that ever happened to any of you?
Yes, two of them right there. Two different incidences, actually. Roger was at the Tabe Museum, and Stephanie was at the tap room, correct? Do you guys want to share your little stories?
He's a brat.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so if everyone knows where the tap room is, and just recently Saul's Tavern was on the news. So my husband used to have a comic book store down there, where Saul's Tavern is, so I actually have spent a lot of time down there. When we would come in, we would find toys and collectibles on the floor where they obviously should not be. But we moved out of there, we got a new location, and one evening we were walking around town as a group, and we were just going downtown trying to talk to different business owners just to introduce ourselves, see if they were open to us having an investigation there. If they said absolutely not, then we'd be like, okay, thank you for your time, and we would leave. So the owner of the tap room welcomed us down there. He's like, yeah, I'm still remodeling, come down there. I know Wendy and Roger also had a very strong experience down there. When I went down there, I went to the part where I never wanted to go, and I burst into tears, I cried, and I have no idea why. But later that evening, I think what Wendy is talking about, when I went home, I'm a very happy person, go lucky. I try to stay positive. I'm really easy to get along with. I was so angry. I don't know why. And thinking about it makes me so much that I wanted to hit someone, punch a hole in the wall, and I have no explanation for it. And I contacted Wendy right away, and she helped calm me down with Reiki. It took about 10-15 minutes, but I felt fine. And it did take a few days for me to feel normal again, but that was not. So, but you have to realize too, when we went in there, we were just walking around looking at stuff. We didn't have our protection, our crystal, nothing. So that's, yeah.
Talk about Tavi, yeah. Okay, so mine would be the Tavi Museum downtown. Was it with this group or was it with our previous group? Okay, we were all upstairs where permanent collection room and all that good stuff. And first of all, we were getting a lot of answers through our spirit box. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, somebody asked, "What do you want?" "Roger." Okay. So I walked there, and I'm like, "What do you want me to do, or what do you want from me?" And then it said the mechanical room. So I walked in the mechanical room, and for some reason I sat down right next to the furnace. And so what do you want me to do now? Touch the flame. And as soon as it said that, and then I believe later on that night there was a love triangle?
Yes. Roger's intuitive as well, and he picks up on spirit activities. So that investigation, he was able to connect with a love triangle, 2 men and a woman. One of them was hit in the back of the head. So that could be just his story, what he experienced, but I don't know if you guys are familiar with Michael Christopher. He's a local psychic medium. Him and I happened to go in there with another person who does healing and stuff, Jeannette. We went into there, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, Wendy, there's a love triangle going up there, and I see the spirit of this little girl." And I'm like, "Yep, validation." So nobody had shared any of the things that we had experienced with Michael, and he was able to pick up on exactly what we had experienced that night. So
Yeah, I was pulled out from that whole situation, had to go outside.
yeah, he changed not only physically, but emotionally, he was not himself. He was drained, he was aggressive to the point where I had to remove him.
Yeah, I have a tan golf hat that was brand new, didn't have a wrinkle in it. And in one of the pictures that we took, I knew it was me, but it looks nothing like me.
Yeah.
I mean, the hat was
It was like a plaid.
A plaid.
Yeah.
The shirt was different. I just looked, completely different.
Yeah, even the size of him. I always joke with him that he's a petite guy. He doesn't like that so much. But in this photo, he looked taller, and he was he was working out, and I was like, holy.
That night, I had a goatee.
Yeah.
I've always had a beard.
Yeah.
And it shows me with just a goatee.
Yep.
Well,
So that was and that
Yep.
it took about a month to get that attachment cleared from him. So now we use Reiki to protect ourselves, right, friends? That's my mom voice.
All right. Well, on that note, that's a little spooky for me. We've actually reached the end of our event. So I'd like to thank our guests today very much for coming. And this was very, very interesting to hear the 2 perspectives. And I think they meshed really well, actually. And I'd like to make a few announcements. We will have one more of these next semester. We tried to have them once a semester. We've not decided yet on what the topic will be, so please stay tuned. If you have any suggestions, let us know. And events coming up here. This Friday, there's an art reception right here. I see the art has not been hung yet, but I expect the best, right? As always. And that's at 6:30. And then on Saturday, English Club has an event. If you'd like to announce that yourself, please.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Raspity. This is my peer student, Aaron. First, we'd like to thank Ms. Kimball and Dr. Lartius for sharing your time with us. We've been really impressed with the energy in the room, and we would really love it if you guys would carry that energy forward with us this Saturday. We're going to be doing a live event over at the Alshire Theater, which we just learned a lot about tonight. It kind of fits in with the theme. You'll see a lot of prominent English authors. I myself will be portraying linguistic English author Percy Shelley in my best British accent, which I will not unveil tonight, so you'll have to come if you want to hear that. But to explain the event in a little more detail, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, John Ronald Rule Tolkien.
You looked it up. I'm impressed. But yes, Saturday at 6 o'clock, we'll have our first showing, 7 and then 8. It's a free will offering. We're trying to raise some funds for the English Club for some events next semester, some writing retreats. So we would love to see you all. Please feel free to come in costume yourselves. We'll be in costume as we already are. As we can see, I came prepared. So we would love to see you there. If you have any questions, me and Raspity will be in the back. And we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
And that's a murder mystery, right? With audience participation. So I think that's really exciting. And there's 3 showings. So you can come at 6, at 7, or at 8 p.m. So I think nobody has an excuse not to go this Saturday. Okay, and then Katie has an announcement.
Yep, in December, the 12th through the 15th, the Campus Players Theater Group is putting on a show called the Brothers Grimm Spectacular-thon. I'm directing that show. This is my directorial debut, so I would love to see everybody there. Like I said, we've started rehearsals, and we're excited to put that on. So December 12th through the 15th.
Well, thank you. And let's thank our guests, please. Thank you.